Hello, beautiful people. So some of you have been sending me notes about psychological evaluations. Lots of questions on psychological evaluations. I know that everyone is always telling you to be completely honest and forthcoming when you are asked questions about your personality. And so today's video is going to deal with ambiverts. And so what is that? So, well, most of the time when you are asked if you're an extrovert or an introvert, you picked introvert, where you're basically shy and keep it to yourself and don't get involved and don't take a leading role in situations. Or you pick an extrovert where you're outgoing, you have a great personality, you enjoy being around crowds, you don't mind meeting, going up to strangers, having them, asking them questions, etc. So, but for some of you, as you may be asked, and you want to be completely honest, and you may answer that you're not either of those two. You're actually an ambivert, and a lot of the times you have to kind of ask yourself, can being an ambivert cause you to fail the psychological evaluation? So please pay attention, because this is very important. So recently one of my subscribers reached out to me, saw one of my videos, and asked me why I thought that he had failed the psychological evaluation. So whenever I'm asked this question, I engage into a type of interview of, is this your first time taking this type of exam? How many of these have you taken? What kind of questions did they ask of you? How did you answer those questions, etc., etc.? And so finally, we got to the part where he was asked if he was an introvert or extrovert, and he told them, neither. I'm actually an ambivert. And so to kind of tell you where this is in the personality gauge is it's kind of like if I ask you a question and the answer is yes, no, and maybe. A lot of people think that being an ambivert is a maybe, right? You're maybe one or maybe the other, depending on the circumstance. And so this applicant, in his psychological evaluation, answered that he was an ambivert. And so he failed the psychological evaluation. Not to say this is the reason why he failed the evaluation, but it's definitely a concern, and I'm about to explain to you why. Now, ambiverts can participate in social interactions and at times enjoy meeting new people. But one key thing that ambiverts have that are lacking in extroverts, which are the people that most often become peace officers, state troopers, police officers, deputy sheriffs, is that they are not assertive. And so we already know that introverts are shy, and shy is not a good quality to have when you are trying to enter the law enforcement profession. So that's important to know. But with ambiverts, they have trouble being assertive. And so if you're trying to enter into a law enforcement position where you are having to be assertive, you cannot be shy. You have to be, right there in the middle of things. You have to go from a 0 to 100, and sometimes back to 0 in terms of how responsive you are in different law enforcement situations. So this is not a test where you're asked a question and you answer yes or you answer no, and if you can't decide on either, you pick a maybe. Whenever you decide that you are an ambivert, you're truly hampering your ability at getting into law enforcement. And again, for what I just mentioned, not being assertive enough. One more issue is that when taking these psychological evaluations or any type of police examinations, right before the time is up, they'll give you, say, a couple hours to complete a test. They'll give you an announcement of 5 minutes. They'll say, you have 5 minutes left, so finish what you have to finish. So if you ever are taking these law enforcement exams and they tell you, hey, you have 5 minutes left, and you look down and you have 20 questions to answer, there's no way that you're going to be able to answer all those 20 questions if you actually read and think about it, because it's going to take 2, 3, 4 minutes per question, and so there's just absolutely no way. But you don't want to leave the answers to those questions empty, because if you leave them empty, you obviously think that it's okay to have unfinished business, which is not good in law enforcement. You have to complete your investigation from start to finish until you are relieved of duty, or you hand it over to an investigator that's going to take it even deeper. But on these exams, the police exams, I'm not talking about the psychological exams, on the police exams, you have to kind of, if they give you a 5 minutes, you have 5 minutes, better wrap it up. These are police exams, and so you're either going to get it right or wrong. So my advice to you, and hopefully you're taking a lot of my advice, is to go down to the bottom of the exam, the test, and then bubble in a letter that you choose. For me, I always bubbled in the letter B as in boy, and so I bubbled in all of the 18 questions from the bottom up, and then I would spend the next 5 minutes answering the 2 questions that I had not bubbled in, because that's going to improve your chances of passing these exams. Simply leaving them blank is not a good idea. Now, for psychological examinations, there's a concern that you can't use the same strategy that I just mentioned for police entry examinations, the post ballot B, etc., because you may answer something on there that is going to be detrimental to you passing the psychological examination. So it's not a get it right or wrong, as is the case in police examinations for entry level positions. Your written exam, they're going to ask you some questions. What's the quickest route if these roads are closed, etc., etc. On police examinations, you can guess what I just told you. I picked the letter B. You could pick the letter A. You could pick the letter C. Whatever you think is mostly used in these multiple choice exams. But for the psychological examination, you have to pace yourself so that you can complete the entire exam and do not guess, obviously, on these things. You have to be assertive. And so when you read the question, does it fit the mold? Does it fit, the type of job you're seeking in terms of your personality? And so that's the best way to answer. Avoid answering maybes and avoid leaving the answers blank. Again, it's going to show that you take too long to make a decision. You're not assertive enough. You're not confident enough. And that's going to be detrimental in you being able to pass the psychological examination. So once you're done with this video, I recommend you go online and then look up the definition of ambivert and see why, and confirm what I just said, to confirm and verify why it's not a good idea to be an ambivert if you're trying to get into a law enforcement or government law enforcement type of position. I thank you for listening. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, do like and share it with other people who are trying to pass the psychological examination. Every little bit of advice helps. Again, one thing in closing, I always like to add these things at the very end. When you go to these psychological evaluations, make sure you dress professional. Make sure that your hair is, nicely trimmed, looks very, very professional in appearance, that you've taken a shower, that you don't overuse cologne and other things that have recently come up on some of my discussions with subscribers. You want to come across as professional, have good eye contact, the way you stand in these interviews, because the psychologist is examining everything, all of these areas. Do you have good eye contact? Do you come across as professional? Do you come across as knowledgeable in your field? Are you going to be the type of person that's going to be a good fit for your future department? Are you going to get along with others? Have you ever dealt with conflict? How have you resolved conflict? Those are all things that you need to be prepared, and maybe some of you, it requires getting in front of a mirror and answering these questions to yourself so that you can kind of catch some twitches or something that you're doing that may be sending up red flags. For students that I currently have, I talk to them, and while I'm talking to them, their eyes, not all of them of course, a few of them, their eyes are wandering everywhere, and that's not a good sign of a person who's confident. It's a person, it comes across sometimes as somebody who can't be focused. Again, for some people, it's just learning these skills so that when you get to the job interviews, when you get to the psychological examination, you don't completely wash out because you just don't know what you're doing. One last thing, I'm multilingual, and on these multiple choice examinations, there were times back then that I would read it and I couldn't quite understand what was being asked, so I assumed what was being asked. And unfortunately, you can't assume, because it's going to hurt your chances of passing the psychological examination. And so one of the subscribers had reached out to me asking me if I knew what a concussion was, and because during the psychological examination he mentioned that he played football his whole life, and so the psychologist said, "Oh, did you ever have any concussions?" And he did not understand what that meant, and he said, "Yes, I have had many." He thought the psychologist was asking him about conversations and friendships. That's what he thought the psychologist was asking him. But no, he thought the psychologist was asking him if he had any concussions, which are head injuries, and those are pretty serious. And so yes, he said, "Yeah, I've had many." Of course, he didn't pass the psychological examination. At the end, the psychologist told him that he should have a thorough medical examination to make sure that some of these injuries are not going to affect his ability to enter law enforcement. He didn't understand that, why the psychologist said at the very end, but obviously it was a misunderstanding issue. So how do you overcome these things? You start reading more. You start reading books. You start going to the bookstore, to the library. You started finding law enforcement common terms that you need to know what they mean. Look at the multiple choice examinations, and if it says the question, say most likely, least likely, always, never, those are flag words that just one word will change the whole question. And this is how you get tripped up. This is how you fail these examinations. I know we went off topic a little bit, but I'm always trying to offer you these gold nuggets because I want you to apply these as you're trying to get into law enforcement. Thanks for listening. Until the next video, send me some ideas or questions for me to discuss, because I always welcome your input, and I hope that you appreciate my life advice. Take good care of yourselves.